There's something special happening in the upper Midwest. The Twin Cities have seen some massive wins for urbanism in the last few weeks, accelerating the region's transformation, already the most exciting in the Midwest, into a less car-dependent, more livable, denser place. In this video, we'll dive into these big wins on zoning, intercity rail, active transportation, and especially transit, and what they'll mean for the future of the Twin Cities. Welcome to Heartland Urbanist. Let's dig in. I'm Matt Caffrey, a dad and an organizer based in Columbus, Ohio. It can be easy to be discouraged about the state of urbanism in the Midwest. If you need to be re-inspired about what's possible, this video is for you. Chapter 1, a state and metro ready for transformation. Minneapolis-St. Paul is the third largest metro in the Midwest, with 3.7 million people. The Twin Cities have had a lot going for them. The metro has long had a fairly strong urbanist culture. Its bike infrastructure is pretty good, especially off-street paths. As we discussed in the last video, its park systems are among the best in the country. And there's a culture of getting out and enjoying the city, perhaps making up for the cold winter months when folks largely stay inside. The metro opened its first light rail almost 20 years ago. At the time, bus service wasn't great, but today, Metro has 2 light rail lines, 2 bus rapid transit lines, and 3 BRT light lines. Billions of dollars worth of transit-oriented development have followed. Many services run 24/7, or nearly so, with frequency every 15 minutes during the day. The cities also have regional rail lines serving communities north and west of the cities. Finally, the Twin Cities region has a diversified economy, higher education, state government, healthcare and manufacturing, and more. And it's growing, so their tax base is a lot healthier than some other cities in the Midwest. The region has a lot to work with, but of course it also has its challenges. There's been a rise in homelessness, housing is increasingly unaffordable, there are related racial and economic justice challenges, the city is torn apart by urban freeways, perhaps more severely than other cities. It's still very car dependent, with 84% of trips made in a private vehicle. In short, the region faces many of the same challenges as other growing cities in the US, but it also has assets that can help it overcome these challenges. Maybe the most significant asset for the Twin Cities is local and state elected officials, elected in recent years, who are believers in transit and urbanism. Chapter 2, groundbreaking zoning reform. The first big win we have to talk about is Minneapolis's bold new zoning plan. In 2018, after electing a new progressive mayor, Jacob Frey, and city council, the city adopted a new comprehensive plan called Minneapolis 2040. The plan ended parking requirements and single-family zoning. It allowed for triplexes in all neighborhoods and expanded the areas where even denser housing can be built. It included funding to directly address homelessness and a mandate that every new multifamily development include a certain percentage of affordable units. In short, it did pretty much everything that housing advocates have long called for. Even with progressives in charge of city government, though, the plan has faced determined opposition. NIMBY opponents have challenged it in court. In fact, that process is still ongoing, with NIMBYs arguing in increasingly bad faith that the plan would be bad for the environment. The Sierra Club submitted a brief to the court explaining how wrong they are. At least one court has ruled against the city, but again, the process is ongoing. While that works its way through the courts, the plan has faced other challenges. Most notably, the city's zoning code did not match the plan, making some of the boldest provisions hard to implement in practice. On May 25th, the city council unanimously passed a new zoning code in alignment with the comprehensive plan. This is a huge win that should accelerate Minneapolis's transition to a denser and more livable city. Chapter 3, massive wins statewide. Next, in 2022, Minnesota elected a pro-transit Democratic majority to both houses of its state legislature. Along with Democratic Governor Tim Walz, who was re-elected last year, that means Minnesota now has a governing trifecta that is able to pass good urbanist policy. And let me tell you, they have been busy. They've passed all sorts of policies I'm thrilled about: paid family leave, labor protections for workers, gun violence prevention, and more. But their progress on urbanist issues is truly stunning. Just this session, the legislature passed one-time funding to build 3 new bus rapid transit lines in the Twin Cities. More on that in a minute. They passed ongoing dedicated funding of $500 million a year for transit and active transportation connections in the metro. That funding comes from a new metro area-wide 0.75 cent sales tax. They passed transit funding for other parts of Minnesota too. They passed new rules for evaluating highway projects based on the climate impacts. They created an e-bike credit. They wrote new rules giving transit vehicles traffic signal priority. They addressed racial and economic justice with a pilot free transit program, decriminalizing fare enforcement so it's more like a parking ticket, and unarmed ambassadors on transit vehicles and platforms to create a safer and more welcoming environment for riders. They funded a new passenger rail connection between the Twin Cities and Duluth that will run 4 round trips a day. The new transit funding for the Twin Cities will unlock an incredible transformation, so we're going to dig deeper on that part. But before we do, it's worth talking about how all of this progress came about. Minnesota has long had a progressive bent. It was home to Al Franken and Paul Wellstone, after all. But it's also been fairly evenly divided. They elected a Republican governor as recently as 2006. Democrats hadn't controlled the state house for a decade. None of this progress would have been possible without a governing trifecta that values transit and urbanism instead of looking down on cities. That said, it isn't as simple as elect Democrats and they'll do everything we want. Transit and housing advocates have been building power in state for decades.
My name is MJ Carpio. I am campaign manager for Move Minnesota and Move Minnesota Action.
Move Minnesota had a clear policy agenda ready and the organizational strength to push for it so that when the political reality shifted, they were ready to go.
One of the things that I really admire about Move Minnesota, even before I joined, is their commitment to asking not for what was possible, but for what was necessary. We have always connected transit advocacy to every other issue because, in fact, it is related to every other issue. It took decades of asking people to do it, but then waiting on that narrative change to finally it became, oh, we're no longer asking people to join the fold, but they're asking if they could join. We're always talking about making transit services more accessible, more frequent, and just more of them, period. The sales tax revenue could really make a huge difference in the major tenets of like what makes good transit. People love the bus and they want more of it.
I work in this industry. I know how hard it can be to keep things going, especially when progress is blocked by the politics of the moment. Just keeping people engaged, raising enough money to keep the lights on, and building a team capable of making progress when the opportunity presents itself is a remarkable achievement. But transit advocates in Minnesota did that and much more.
One key thing that Move Minnesota did is to celebrate Transit Equity Day, which is in celebration of Rosa Parks' birthday and her legacy to have public transit as a basic civil right. That was one of the very first things that we did this session and to set the tone. And we had a great variety of testifiers, of policy wonks, but also transit users, faith leaders, elected officials who were there to support that. So if you're thinking about how can we succeed in this movement, you got to do something like that. You need a broad set of voices to advocate for the same thing and talk about why they support it.
That's the lesson all of us in tougher states can learn from. Build your community and get ready for the moment when there's an opportunity. Chapter 4, From Corridors to a Network. Okay, now let's go deeper on what all of these big wins will mean for transit in Minneapolis-St. Paul. To put it succinctly, right now the Twin Cities has decent transit along a few corridors. But the plans they are now implementing will transform their system into an integrated network with great connectivity and service across the metro area. Already under construction, Metro is extending the Green Line into the southwest suburbs, opening in 2027. They're also constructing a new Gold Line BRT with service from St. Paul, connecting to the Green Line downtown, east into the suburbs, opening in 2025. They're also in the assessment phase for a new BRT line and 2 BRT light lines. The Purple Line, opening in 2026, will connect downtown St. Paul with transfers to the Green and Gold lines to White Bear Lake in the northeast suburbs. The new B Line, BRT Light, will run from southwest Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul with 9 planned connections to other light rail and BRT lines. The E Line, also BRT Light, will connect the University of Minnesota to downtown Minneapolis and the south central suburbs. Further expansions are planned and all the more likely because of the state's new funding and new federal funding. The Blue Line light rail is being massively extended into the northwest suburbs. A new F-Line BRT will run from downtown Minneapolis into the north central suburbs. A new streetcar would connect downtown St. Paul to the airport and the Mall of America beyond, creating an integrated triangle of transit with the green and blue lines. Finally, there are more proposed BRT light lines. F would run far north of downtown Minneapolis. G would run north and south of downtown St. Paul. And H would run from east of St. Paul in a radial alignment north of downtown, then connect with several lines north of Minneapolis. These are the lines that the legislature recently funded, so they're happening. When you zoom out, you can see that the transit system is transforming from a few useful but fairly isolated lines along busy corridors to an integrated network that stretches across the metro area. The transit network will connect every corner of the region. A U of M student could board a bus from campus, transfer in downtown Minneapolis, get on the light rail, travel down to the Mall of America, work their shift at the mall, switch to the streetcar, take it over to St. Paul, have dinner with a friend, and take the Green Line light rail back, and then switch to the bus for the last bit to their dorm. It's easy to get excited about the ramifications. Totally transformational. Chapter 5. More to be excited about. All that transit will soon be able to take you out of the metro too. As I already mentioned, the state funded intercity rail to Duluth, but Amtrak's Connects Us plan also calls for service to Madison, Wisconsin, as well as more frequent service to Milwaukee and Chicago. The state is also studying extending commuter rail by almost 30 miles northeast into St. Cloud. Minneapolis and St. Paul are also working on massive expansions of their protected bikeway systems, adding many, many miles over the last few years and not slowing down. Conclusion. Advocates of urbanism and transit in the Twin Cities have been racking up some impressive wins for the last few years, especially in the last few weeks. Almost everywhere you look, you see really meaningful plans being put into motion to add density, to address housing affordability, to encourage active transportation, to add intercity passenger rail connections, and most of all, to massively expand transit. Chicago is still clearly the Midwest's leader for transit and urbanism, but no other metro in the Midwest is making as much progress in the right direction as Minneapolis-St. Paul. A city is more than the sum of its parts. All of these systems are interconnected, so progress in one area will support and reinforce progress in another. As transit improves, demand for denser housing increases, and demand for parking decreases, which leads to higher transit ridership. More density and less driving reduces costs for cities so they can provide better services. I can't wait to see what happens in Minneapolis-St. Paul in the next few years.
The future is bright. I'm really excited about the future implementation, which is just key for letting our local agency dream big. I would love it if people could connect this Minnesota win to the larger global climate resilience movements. This is, in fact, possible. It's happening right now.
I'd love to hear what you think is most exciting from everything happening in the Twin Cities. What would you like to see your city emulate? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, let me know your ideas for future videos on this channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it so other folks can discover it too, and subscribe for more videos about urbanism in the Midwest. And if you'd like to help us expand the channel, please make a contribution via LibrePay. There's a link in the description. If you want to support future transit wins in Minnesota, join Move Minnesota. Again, there's a link in the description. No matter where you live, get involved in fighting to make your city and community better. And remember, your vote is one of the most meaningful ways you can shape what's possible. Heartland Urbanist is also available on urbanists.video, a free, community-driven YouTube alternative. We post all of our videos there ad-free 1 week earlier. So go check us out over at urbanist.video. Thanks for watching this video. See you next time when we'll dive into Indianapolis.